Okay, so question 1. So everybody, are you with me? So tutorial 5 and we are starting question 1. So question 1 is saying that we have an economy that autonomous consumption is 10. So autonomous consumption, you know that it is A, right? So whatever is given in the question, the first thing, the easy thing that we can do is that whatever is given in the question, we write down for ourselves. So it means that we want to summarize what is given, right? So let's summarize it. Let me see that how I can summarize it. What is given? That it is saying that the autonomous consumption, right, is A, is equal to 10. Then MPC is given. MPC is equal to 0.7. You know that MPC in the consumption function is actually on V. Then tax is 20% of income. So if you remember from your lecture, whenever we are talking about a tax, okay? So tax has two components, like consumption. We have autonomous tax, and then we have that part of the tax which is dependent on income. So autonomous tax, again, like autonomous consumption, it means that it is totally independent of the amount of the income that we are earning. It is like GST. Once you go to buy anything, the price of that product, it is already included some amount of the tax. So it means that no matter that how much is your income, you have to pay that tax. Or for example, you go and you eat in a restaurant. Once you look at your bill, at the end of the bill, it is saying that tax. For example, the total amount of the bill is 100, and then it is saying that, okay, now we have 6% of GST. So it means that this 6% is not considering that whether you are earning something or you are not earning, you are a student or whatever. So that's why it is totally dependent on your income. That is called autonomous tax. So this is the autonomous tax. Any kind of tax that we are paying according to our income is induced tax. Now this question is saying that tax is 20% of your income. So it means that this tax is dependent on your income. We have to see that how much we are earning, then 20% of that is the tax. That's why this means that it is our tax rate. So if I want to talk that, okay, how much is induced tax? This is my tax rate. So tax rate in 20%. But how much is my induced tax? It means that you have to put Y here. So that's why induced tax is this component. This component is the autonomous tax. Okay, then what else is given? Is given that the government expenditure is 50, so I have put it here, and the transfer payment is 5. So transfer payment is 5. Then what else? Investment is 20, so I put investment equal to 20, and the net export is equal to 10. So NX is equal to 10. What is net export? Means that the amount of the products that we export minus the amount of the product that we import. So this is our net export. So these are the given factors, right? Based on these given factors, now we want to calculate first. It is asking us to calculate the consumption function. So do remember that for the consumption function, of course, once we were talking about the closed economy, so the consumption function was CA plus BY. Okay, that is for closed economy. But once we are talking about open economy, which normally in your exam you receive about the open economy most probably. So instead of Y, we're gonna have YD, means disposable income. So disposable income, what is the meaning of disposable income? It is the amount of the money, the amount of income that I can put at the end in my pocket. So if I'm talking about the income itself, I have to pay some amount of that income as a tax. So it means that I cannot say that, for example, if my salary, for example, is 1,000, I cannot say that I'm earning 1,000 because I haven't deducted the tax yet. If I put aside the tax, I pay the tax first, then I can say the amount that I'm earning. That is the concept of disposable income. Apart from my income, sometimes like this situation that we are dealing with now, COVID-19, the government is giving us some money because the government wants to help us. So that's why apart from my income, sometimes government is giving me another sort of money, which is the TR, transfer payment. So in another word, if I want to calculate the consumption function, first I have to calculate my disposable income. So what is the disposable income? Why D is small d or capital D doesn't make any difference, means that the amount that I earn minus the amount that I have to pay. My earning is my salary income plus what the government is telling me, giving me, minus whatever I have to pay to government. So this is the disposable income. So in order for you to remember it very easy, you just remember that disposable income is whatever money will be in your pocket, means that you're earning minus tax. What is your earning? The amount of your salary plus whatever government sometimes is helping you. Sometimes they don't help at all. Minus the amount of tax. So now, if we want to form disposable income now in this particular question, maybe I can write that YT is Y plus. How much is TR? TR is 5. I put 5. Minus how much is tax? Now I have to form my tax function. So tax itself, it was here. So it is autonomous tax plus induced tax. So now, do we have any autonomous tax? If I'm not mistaken, I don't see here any autonomous tax. So that's why here, once you don't see the autonomous tax, so it means that you assume that this is 0. Okay, so once it is 0, so it means that we put our earning minus our tax. Then what is our tax? Is only the induced tax. So induced tax, do remember that here minus tax. So it means that the amount of the tax is 20% of my income. This is my induced tax. So this whole thing is what is my disposable income. Now the question is not asking me how much is the disposable income. The question is asking me what is the consumption function. So this whole thing, this whole YD has to be replaced in the consumption function. So that's why C is equal to, how much is A? A is given, is 10 plus. That's one more important thing. In your exam, if you don't write this formula, you are losing 1 mark. Because normally in the marking scheme, for each formula, they put 1 mark. So make sure that you're writing the formula. Then one by one, you replace. Consumption function, autonomous consumption plus B, which is MPC, is given 0.7. And then YD. YD we have calculated here. You directly, you replace Y plus 5 minus 0.2 Y. That's all. That's done. So then you calculate this whole thing. It's gonna be equal to 30.5 plus 0.56 Y. This is your consumption function. So just then, I'm sure that you have calculated. Did you get the same thing? My mouse is not working. Yes, okay, thank you. Then we have to calculate, the next part is asking us to calculate aggregate expenditure function. Again, do remember, for aggregate expenditure function, the first part is that you have to write the formula. The formula of aggregate expenditure is that C plus I plus G plus NX. Everything I, G, and X is given. C, we calculated in the previous part. So it means that it is just a simple replacement, substitution. So we substitute. Instead of C, I put I is given 20, G is given 50, and NX is given 10. And then we calculate, it should be 93.5 plus 0.56. So did you get the same number, Jason? Okay. Then the next part is asking about equilibrium income. So equilibrium income, okay, till now, the question is asking you about consumption function and aggregate expenditure function. So as we discussed before, whenever the question is asking you about the function, so it means that you don't need to replace y. Just you have to keep y. Then now they want to know that how much is this y, how much is the equilibrium. So what is the equilibrium formula? Again, do remember that you have to write down the formula for your exam. Otherwise, you will lose the mark. So you just write that the formula for equilibrium income is AE is equal to Y. So in another word, you remember that AE, we would say that it is equal to our demand because AE is C, I, G, and X. So it means that this means that demand is equal to supply. Y is income, is GDP, is our supply. So it means that in simple words, it means that we are putting demand equal to supply. And that's always in economy, always this is the equilibrium. So now we have AE function. So we just, again, simple replacement. The AE function is here, just we put it down there. Equal to Y, that's all. So this is the equilibrium. Then from here, you have to calculate Y. So you calculate Y, the amount of the Y is 2.212.5. This is the equilibrium income. Next part. It is saying to calculate the autonomous expenditure multiplier. So it means that we want to know that if any of this autonomous expenditure, if the autonomous expenditure is increasing 1 unit, how much is the amount of increase in GDP? So what is the formula of autonomous multiplier effect? Autonomous expenditure multiplier is 1 over 1 minus B. If it is two-sector economy. Now we have the open economy. So once we have the open economy, so it means that 1 minus T is also added. So one by one we replace, right? Everything is given to us. E is given, T is given. So that's why we have to just replace. Do remember that you have to write down the formula again. How much was our B? B was 0.7. How much is the T? T was, if you remember, it was saying that 20% of our income. And then the multiplier will be 2.273. Normally in the exam, for example, if we have any decimals, the exam will tell you that until how many decimals you have to calculate, 2 decimals, 3 decimals. For example, here, let's say that we are calculating the 3 decimals. So now we want to know that the next part of the question. Careful, I don't have the next part. Okay, let me stop it here and get back to the question. Okay, we have calculated until part D, the multiplier. Now it is saying that the aggregate expenditure, so we are here. The aggregate expenditure function, if the government decide to spend an additional 5 billion on new schools and hospitals. So what is it saying? This part of the question is saying that now so did you get that? Where are we? So we are answering this part E of question 1. And it is saying that government is increasing the expenditure for 5 units, 5 billion. So it means that we have the change in government expenditure. It means that government expenditure is going to increase for 5 units. Now, first of all, we want to know that what is the new aggregate expenditure function? The new aggregate expenditure function. So what is it? Everything is like previous aggregate expenditure, which is this. Everything is like this function. Just instead of G that previously was 50, now we have to put it 55. So in another words, we can say that the change is in this way, that we can say that A aggregate expenditure 2 is equal to aggregate expenditure 1 plus the change in government expenditure. So it means that we can just replace aggregate expenditure 1 is here, just we need to add another 5 units. So aggregate expenditure 2, it means that is equal to 93.5 plus 0.56y plus 5, another 5 units extra of G. And it will be equal to 98.5 plus 0.56y. This is aggregate expenditure with the change in government expenditure. Now, how much is the equilibrium, GDP or income with new aggregate expenditure function? Because we have a new aggregate expenditure function, right? Which is $98.5 plus 0.56y. So, how much is the GDP? We have 2 ways to calculate GDP. The first way is that as the calculation of GDP is always AE is equal to Y. So now we have to keep this AE and we put it equal to Y. So it means that just we need to put 98.5 plus 0.56y is equal to Y. This is the first way. And the answer should be, if I'm not mistaken, Y should be 223.86. This is the first way, okay? So the first way, we use the approach that we used just now, the formula of the equilibrium, that demand is equal to supply. Demand is aggregate expenditure, which is equal to our supply. So this is the amount of our GDP with new equilibrium, right? So second way, what is the second way? You remember that we have the formula that the change in income is equal to multiplier effect multiplied by the aggregate, the change in autonomous expenditure. So now the change in autonomous expenditure, what is this? What part of the autonomous expenditure has changed? This time is G. So this change in autonomous expenditure now is equal to change in government expenditure, which is equal to 5 units. And then we can multiply this 5 multiplied by the amount of the multiplier effect. Multiplier effect, we calculated before. How much is that? Here, we calculate it. Multiplier effect is this. So it means that if I replace this multiplier effect, 2.273 here, 2.273. So the change in delta Y, how much is that? How much is this change? Let's calculate. That I have to calculate, I have to put 5 multiply 2.273. So is equal to 11,365. So the change in income is 11.365. This is the change in Y, right? This is this. So if I want to know that the new equilibrium, it means that the previous equilibrium in income plus the change in income. How much is the previous equilibrium? We calculated in part C. So it was 212.5 plus the change. The change is 11.365. So how much is Y2? Y2 by right, how much do we expect to be? Y2 by right, we have to expect to be this much. So it means that it is 223.86. Let's say that it is the same thing or not. 212.5 plus 11.365. 223.86. So exactly the same thing, right? So I think with this, we are done with question 1. So any questions so far? No question? So if you understood this, so immediately start the next question, because next question is exactly very similar to this question. So for those that they haven't practiced, please immediately you start. So let's summarize this together. So all of us together. It is talking about a developing country, and it is saying that this developing country is rich in crude oil and gas resources. It has been bogged down with a recent severe downturn, with unemployment reaching to 40%. It's very high rate of unemployment. Then it is saying that, okay, one by one, let's summarize. It is saying that autonomous consumption is equal to 50. So we write that, okay, let me share my screen with you. Okay, so I'm summarizing this question for myself first. So autonomous consumption means what? Means my A. So A is equal to 50. Investment is equal to 20. Government expenditure G is equal to 50. Autonomous tax. Okay, previous question, we didn't have any autonomous tax. Now we have autonomous tax. So we have capital T, which is autonomous tax is 10. Then we have export, X, which is 20. Then we have import, M, which is 25. And transfer payment, TR, is 5. Then marginal propensity to consume, MPC, which is equal to B, is equal to 0.6. The income tax rate, so it means that 0.3 means that 30% of my income I have to pay as tax. So small t is 0.3. So with detail working and atom all question by determine calculating. Okay, you see it is saying that 2 decimal points here. So again, like previous one, let's see that what question is asking. The consumption function, aggregate expenditure function, fine. Then equilibrium, real expenditure, yes, means that first in these two is a function, means that we let y to remain in the function, then we calculate the equilibrium, we put demand equal to supply, then multiplier effect, and then again this time is asking that imagine that the government wants to change to increase 20 billion, calculate the effect of equilibrium. So it's very easy, let's do it again. So I hope that all of you are doing with me. We can share the answer. So this is what I have summarized for myself here. So first, consumption function. So consumption function C is A plus B Y D. Do remember that you have to write this formula, okay? Then maybe you can calculate YD separately, or you can directly replace YD here. So if you know that what is YD, so you can maybe directly replace. So A is 50 is given, plus B is MPC, again it's given, 0.6. Then you have to open a bracket. So this whole bracket is going to be our YD. So now what was YD? You remember we say whatever we earn minus whatever we pay. So our earning, what is our earning? First is my income. Then is the amount that I receive from government, my TR. So that's why I added with 5. Then minus what? Minus the tax. So previously tax was only induced tax. Now I have autonomous tax. So maybe I can put a small bracket here again. So it's autonomous tax. This is my tax plus 0.3 y here. So this is again in another bracket. Why I have two brackets? Because of this one minus here. So it means that if I want to open up this whole bracket, I can write it like this, that it is 50 plus 0.6, then it is y plus 5 minus 10 minus 0.3 y. So do remember that this minus is amount of t. So this whole thing is t, okay? Normally what students do mistake is that they put this positive. Once you calculate this positive is wrong because you have to deduct it from the tax, and this whole thing is tax. So that's why this negative is going inside this bracket. It's going inside, it's going for 10 and it's going until 0.3. So you can see that both of them are negative. So that's why I put this tax into the brackets, that you know that you have to put this negative for both of these components in the bracket. So then once you calculate, the whole calculation is that the consumption function is 47 plus 0.42y. So this is the consumption function. After you calculate the consumption function, it is very easy to calculate the aggregate expenditure function. Aggregate expenditure is C plus I plus T plus X minus M. So C is already here. So we just replaced it. That 47 plus 0.42y plus G is given 50. X is given 20 minus M is given 25. So just I replaced, right? I didn't do anything. I have just replaced from the given points of the question. So you calculate, it's gonna be 112 plus 112, 0.425. So this is aggregate expenditure function. After that, it wants you to calculate the equilibrium. So again, equilibrium, as I said, do remember that we have to mention the formula. Equilibrium is saying that demand is equal to supply. So how much is the demand? Aggregate expenditure is given here. Just you have to replace 112 plus 0.42y equal to y. Simple substitution. And then y is equal to 193.y. Just and did you get the same number? Thank you. Then next part is asking to calculate the multiplier effect. Again, like before, multiplier effect, the formula you remember 1 over 2 sector economy, 1 minus B. If it is the open economy, 1 minus T is also added. Just to remember that this B is going to implement if in the bracket, okay? So that's why you have to put 1 minus 0.6 and 1 minus 0.3. The final number should be 1.724. This is the multiplier effect. The last part of the question is saying that this was part D. Part E. Part E is saying that the government expenditure is increasing for 20 units. So again, like previous scenario, it's saying that you calculate a new equilibrium of income. So first, maybe you can calculate the change in income due to change in autonomous expenditure, which is again government expenditure here. So the change in income is equal to multiplier effect multiplied by the change in aggregate expenditure, aggregate autonomous expenditure. So again, change in income is equal to, we have calculated this number. So we have calculated it is 1.724. And then we multiply it by the amount of the change in autonomous expenditure, which is equal to 20. So we replace, substitute. Once we substitute, the total change in income will be 3448. Do remember, this is change in income, okay? So it means that we started from only 10 units extra of government expenditure. But the effect of these 20 units, the effect of these 20 units extra on GDP is 34.5 units more. So that's why it is called, it is multiplier effect. So if I want to calculate the new GDP or new income, then I said that new GDP is equal to previous GDP plus the amount of the change. So previous GDP was here 139.1. So 193 0.1 plus the amount of the change. Here is the change, 34.48, and is equal to 227.58. So this is the new GDP. So is there any another way that we can reach to the same number? Yes. You can first calculate the new aggregate expenditure function. So what is the new aggregate expenditure function? Is this. That's AE2. It means that AE1 plus the change in government expenditure. So it means that you put AE1 function, which is here, plus another G, delta G, which is 20 units. So you can replace here, you can get new AE, and then from the equilibrium function, you can put this AE2 with this formula and you calculate the equilibrium. So you should reach to the same number, which is 227.58. So are we done with the second question? Did I answer all part of the second question? Yep. So the second question is also done. So we are moving to the third question. Even if till now you haven't learned it, so still you have chance. So in the third question, you can do. So again, let me summarize the third question for myself. So what it's saying, again, it is asking that, okay, autonomous consumption, A. Again, I'm summarizing for myself, okay? So let me share the screen with you. If you are summarizing for yourself, you can summarize. So we do the summarizing together, then we calculate. Okay. Sorry, I have to share this. So here. So it is saying that the autonomous consumption A is equal to 60. Investment I is equal to 100. Government expenditure is equal to 17. Autonomous tax, capital T, is 20. Export X is 80. The marginal propensity to consume, MPC, which is RB, is equal to 0.6. Income tax rate, small t, is equal to 0.3, and import rate is equal to 0.1. Okay. Then what the question is asking, again, just I check that whether it wants anything extra or not. It wants consumption function, aggregate expenditure function similar to before, then equilibrium real expenditure, yes, aggregate consumption. Okay. The only difference with, you just look at this, that this is aggregate expenditure function. It is consumption function, okay? So function means that we have to let Y to remain as Y. But here it is saying that aggregate consumption in $1 billion. So it means that now it is asking that you have to give me the number for the aggregate consumption. So in this way, it means that you have to replace the amount of the GDP that you gain in this part, and then you replace in the consumption function. So it means that we want a number. As long as it is Y, it is a function. We don't have any particular number. But once you calculate the real GDP, you replace in the consumption function, then you get the number for the consumption. And then the last part is asking about the multiplier. Okay, let's do it together. Again, we go to share this. First part. What is the first part? As usual, consumption function. C. A plus B Y D. So this time we don't have any transfer payment. So that's why we have A, which is 60 plus MPC, which is 0.6. And then we have disposable income. Our income minus what? Minus T. Now what is T? We have the autonomous tax and we have the induced tax. Right. So do remember that tax has to be deducted. So that's why this deduction means negative has to be for both components of the tax. Then what is the number? The final function for C is 48 plus 0.42. So this is the consumption function. Then after that, what we want to calculate? Aggregate expenditure. Let's go. This is part A. Part B. Aggregate expenditure. What is this? CI again for the 100th times I'm emphasizing. Don't forget to write the formula. C is given. So did I, oh, sorry, I think 40, yeah, did I calculate this correctly, Jason? The C is correct? I'm afraid that, because it doesn't seem that it is correct because I have one C, yeah, maybe correct. Okay. Now, again, we replace this calculated C, we replace in the aggregate expenditure formula. So it is 48 plus 0.421. And then we put I, which is 100, plus G, which is 70, and X, which is 80, and we have to minus M. Okay, so this part is coming M. So normally whenever we are talking about NX, so it means that we are talking about X minus M. X is given, M till now we had only the autonomous import. So we were just talking about the autonomous import so far. Now this time the question is giving us this. It is saying that the import rate. So that's why this is small m. And it is import rate. It means that it is part of our income. So only important part of this question is that once you want to replace this M, here we don't have any autonomous M. We have induced M. Autonomous M and induced M, what does it mean? You see that, for example, in a country, once we want to import a product, some of the products are the necessary products that the country is not producing. So that's why it is necessary, no matter that how much is the amount of the GDP of that country, we have to import. For example, maybe a lot of countries, they don't produce rice, and the rice is the main food. So that's why if they don't have sufficient rice, they have to import, no matter that the country is rich or the country is not rich. But some products are the luxurious products that if a country is rich, they will import that product. So that's why the amount of the import, like many other factors, is dependent of the autonomous import and the induced import. So induced import, it means that the amount of the import which is dependent on our income. So here it is saying that 10% of the income we import, or the import rate is 0.1. So that's why this is our import rate. Once we want to write in the aggregate expenditure, it means that it is 80 minus, now instead of import, we don't have any autonomous import here. So our import function is only 0.1y. This is our import function. So only we replace this import function here. Just to remember that nx means that x minus n. So that's why it comes with a negative sign, and we put 0.1y. So far everything has been like before. The only change is nx. Nx means x minus m. So far whatever we had about m, we had a fixed number. That fixed number means that so far we were giving you only the autonomous m. But now here the question is giving you the induced m, the amount of the import which is dependent on y. So that's why it is saying that 10% of your income. So 10% of your income, so it means that your import function is m plus my. Autonomous m is not given. Whenever something is not given, we assume it is 0. And then the import function will be only the induced m, 0.1y. You replace it in the aggregate expenditure function. So it means that you have to replace it with negative. Do remember that import is a leakage from the system. That's why it is negative. The same with tax. Tax is a leakage from the system. That's why it is negative. So then, how much is the aggregate expenditure function? Aggregate expenditure is equal to 298 plus 0.23. If you compare consumption function here with aggregate expenditure function, so far, if you remember from previous example, let me show it to you previous example. You see our consumption function, for example, here, and then you see our aggregate expenditure function. You compare these two, you compare this function with this function. Both of them, the slope of the function is the same. What has changed is the intercept of the function. So it means that if I want, for example, to draw it, I can say that this is the consumption function. So this, if I want to draw the AE function, I just increase the intercept. Here is 3.5, then I increase it to 935, and then the slope is the same. So this is AE. This is the previous till now. This last example here, to compare, this is consumption function. This is aggregate expenditure function. You look at the slope. The slope now is different. It's not the same slope. What is the reason? Because the import function is not autonomous anymore. So that's why it is affecting the slope of aggregate expenditure. Okay, this is the second part. So this is part B. Part C, as usual, what is what? What does one? It is saying that calculate the equilibrium. Means that demand equal to supply, AE equal to Y. So it means that how much is the AE? AE is 298 plus 0.23Y. Am I right? Equal to Y. How much is Y here? So you just bring this Y on one side, and then once you calculate, the Y will be 438.20. So this is our new equilibrium, or equilibrium, income equilibrium. So the next part of the question, this is part C, okay? The next part of the question is asking you calculate how much is the amount of the consumption. So it doesn't ask you that how much is the consumption function. It is saying that how much is the amount of consumption. So what does it mean? It means that you have to bring this consumption function down. You have to write your consumption function, which is 48 plus 0.42y. And then you have to replace the equilibrium income into it. So just you have to replace y star in C function. So what it will be? So C is equal to 48 plus 0.42. And then instead of y, I just replace the y number, which is 438.24. So this is the amount of my consumption. And the consumption will be equal to 232.06. So this is the total amount of the consumption. The question hasn't asked you, but maybe the question is asking you to calculate the amount of aggregate expenditure, the amount of aggregate expenditure. Then how? You get aggregate expenditure function from here. This is the aggregate expenditure, right? So you write aggregate expenditure function here, and then you replace this equilibrium in it. So this question hasn't asked you, but if they ask you the amount of aggregate expenditure, it means that you write AE equal to this plus 0.32y, and then you replace this y instead of here. So it means that AE is equal to 298 plus 32, and then you replace 438.24. That's all. You calculate the amount of aggregate expenditure. So another type of question that here can be given to you is that here we assume that autonomous import is 0. Maybe another question they are giving you the autonomous M as well. So what will be the difference? Nothing. In here, instead of having one component for M, so you're gonna have the autonomous here, autonomous M as well. So here we don't have this because we assume that the question hasn't given us. So that's why we assume it is 0. If it is given, so it means that you have to add 1 minus M here as well, autonomous M. Then what else? What the last part is asking? The last part is asking for multiplier effect, if I'm not mistaken, right? Multiplier effect. My friend, be careful. Multiplier effect, so far, I write from the beginning till end, whatever multiplier effect we had. Initially, we had this. Then we added the component of the tax. Okay. Now, apart from MPC and tax, in this question, we have this. So induced M or M import rate is also coming part of the multiplier effect. So that's why the formula is going to be this. So we replace one. So do remember this is for closed economy, right? This two is for open economy. If you don't have the import rate, it's going to be 0, whatever we have been doing so far. If you have the import rate, then you have to add it here in the denominator. So then we replace everything. It's going to be 1 minus 0.6, then 1 minus 0.3, and then plus 0.1. Import rate. Right? You calculate, it's going to be 1.47. This is a multiplier effect. Clear or not? Any questions so far? My friend, are you all okay? The autonomous expenditure multiply. Okay, so we calculate. Thank you for following with me, coming with me. And then I think only we have one more question. Let me share my screen with you. Just the screen. So let's share this. I shared this is the last question. I think after that, yeah, after that we're gonna go to the fiscal policy. It is saying that private investment is likely to contribute significantly to economic growth in 2011 and is targeted to grow 12.8% to whatever amount. Growth will be supported. Okay, so till here is talking about what? Private investment means I, am I right? So it means that for Malaysian economy, it is very important that a lot of business are coming to the picture. And that's why you can see that in Malaysian economy, they are actually encouraging a lot of entrepreneurship. Because out of this entrepreneurship, if the idea is good, they can support the idea and it's going to be a new business. New business means new investment. And since the government is not into this picture, it is only the private sector, us. We are doing that. So that's why it is part of I. If it is, the money is coming from government, it's going to go to G. But here, once we have the idea, we are entrepreneurs, for example, we feel that, okay, this business is, for example, specifically like nowadays, online business, you have a new idea, you want to implement that idea, you need some money, you go to the banking sector, you get that money and you start your business. That business is I, is going to contribute to GDP. And this is Malaysia plan, that they want to support private investment. Okay, this is the first sentence. The second sentence is saying that growth means what? Growth means that increase in GDP. So whatever we are discussing about Y equal to AE, this Y is GDP, right? So growth means that the increase in GDP. Actually, all is rotating around GDP. So it means that now growth will be supported by robust consumption. Consumption means that not only private investment, but also people are encouraged to consume. Because it is, again, we know that it is one of the factors increasing GDP. Not only C, and a strong external demand. What does external demand mean? Means foreigners, they want our product, means export. So that's why I'm saying that sometimes in the newspaper article, the wording that we use, they don't use. You see that this is a newspaper article. So instead of saying export, they say external demand, means that external foreigners are demanding for our products. So it is export. So just these two sentences, in a very simple way, it is saying that Malaysia plan is to increase I, this is I, this part is I. Then, not I, robust consumption is talking about C. And apart from that, this part is talking about X. Then Malaysian economy is expected to register a strong growth. For example, 7%. 7%, as you can see here, is a very high growth rate. And expand between 5 to 6 in 2011. This compared to 1.7 contraction in 2000. This improve learning institution. Okay. Now, to improve learning institution, this amount will be set aside to build and upgrade schools. What do you understand this? Build and upgrade school. Does it talk about infrastructure? So it means that apart from C, I, and X, even the government is also contributing. Infrastructure is not in my control, it's not in your control. It's not in the control of foreigners, it's only government. So that's why building and upgrading the school is part of G. So in very simple word, you can see that Malaysia economy is focusing on all the components of aggregate demand. So the question is asking you, identify the key expenditure components of growth for Malaysia economy using aggregate expenditure analysis. So the Malaysian economy is focusing on all of them. Then use the aggregate expenditure diagram to describe the short-run effect of one of the expenditure components describing question. This 5A means that 4A, I assume, not 5A. So it means that the question is saying that, yes, you have said that C, I, X, and G are contributing to the economic growth. Now you show it with a graph that how it is contributing. So how you can contribute if you want to show this graph, do remember that for this kind of questions, you have to show two graphs. You have aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and you have the expenditure, aggregate expenditure function, right? So now we want to draw it together. So, okay. So I start from here. Okay, one, I show both of them is real GDP here. Here is also real GDP, okay? So here is price. Here is, for example, aggregate expenditure. We want to show. First, I have to draw the normal situation, right? So the normal situation, it means that I draw one SAS, and then I draw one 80. So for example, let's say that this is the first year, or sometimes we call it the base year, okay? So this is P1, for example, and this is GDP1 or Y1. Okay. So if I want to show this is aggregate demand and supply. Actually, it's the same concept at aggregate expenditure, right? You can see that this horizontal axis in both of them is the same. Here is real GDP, here is the real GDP. The only difference is that once we want to show aggregate demand and aggregate supply, here is the price. Or it is GDP deflator. It has a concept of price, if you remember from the previous topics. Here it can be GDP deflator or GDP deflator, because it has a concept of the price level. It is or, okay? And then here is aggregate expenditure. Do you remember I told you aggregate expenditure is kind of demand. So just we show it differently. Here we draw aggregate expenditure. First, we have to draw our 45-degree line, which we assume that this is our supply, right? This is our Y. Then we want to draw aggregate demand. So how should I draw it? I have to draw aggregate demand. We know that whenever I draw the aggregate demand, the intersection between aggregate demand and this line is my equilibrium. So since both of them actually they are illustrating the same thing, so that's why I have to make sure that the equilibrium is happening at the same GDP level. So I bring it up from here, I show here. So that's why you can see here that the same level of GDP I'm keeping in both graphs. Now I want to show, for example, the initial level of aggregate expenditure. Let's say that this is aggregate expenditure 1. So say that, for example, government hasn't implemented any of this explanation of, for example, consumption, private investment, or increase in GDP. So this is the initial level. So as you can see, I have drawn in aggregate demand and supply context, and I have drawn it in aggregate expenditure context. So aggregate expenditure, we have the autonomous expenditure, and then we have the induced expenditure, the intersection of aggregate expenditure, and this 45-degree line is giving me the equilibrium. And the equilibrium, as you can see, I kept the same amount of the GDP because both of them actually are talking about the same thing. Then the government is promoting their, for example, consumption, and then G and I, whatever we just discussed now. So what will happen? So do you agree that all of them actually they are increasing AD? So can I shift AD? So I just shift AD. Sorry, I just draw it very badly, but it means that AD is shifting. Then you have to here, once you want to show the shift, do remember that you have to discuss all the discussion that we had so far, that at initial price level with a shift in AD, so what will happen, that the amount of AD will be more than AS, that will push the price level high. Then once the price level is pushing high, so we're gonna have two kind of movements. So you see that at, for example, I can write here that you have to discuss all at P1. So we know that with the shift in AD, so quantity AD will be bigger than quantity SAS, then that will push the price up. Once the price is pushed up, then we have to discuss two things: movement along AD, and then movement along SAS. And then you show that with the increase in price, the amount of quantity GDP is decreasing, and then quantity supply is increasing, because increasing price is more motivation for the supplier, means more benefit, but for the demand, the increase in price, it means that people, the products will be expensive, they will demand less. And then what is the cause of this movement? You have to write again all of them, that it is wealth effect, and then substitution effect. You remember all those things we discussed before, until we reach to new equilibrium. So what is the new equilibrium level? Of course, the amount of the GDP has increased, and that's, it is called economic growth has happened. So it means that GDP is right. So if I want to show all of this in the context of aggregate expenditure, how to show? Again, I know that the amount of GDP for both of them is the same. So that's why I bring the same amount of income here. I show here right. And then what has happened? With the shift, with the change in C, I, whatever. So what was the component? C and I and G and X based on the article are rising. So all of them, so it means that the autonomous expenditure is rising. Until where? It has to rise, that the new equilibrium level is here. Why? Because the amount of the Y GDP has to remain the same. So that's why it is shifting, and then I draw you the new AD. This is AD2. Then here you want to discuss, it has been, here it was the initial equilibrium level. Now we have moved to another equilibrium level, which is C. This C is exactly equal to correspondent with the C in this graph. Now you want to justify this movement. This movement justification is here, right? So all this discussion is available in your slide from, I think, topic 2 until here. This is, for example, topic 2, this adjustment, that how it is shifting, then aggregate demand and supply, everything is here. Now you have to explain about this adjustment from one equilibrium to another equilibrium. So how it is happening? You say that once these factors are increasing, so it will push the aggregate expenditure up, then it will be a kind of shortage here. So it means that demand, when these factors are increasing, demand will be more than supply. Then we have the inventory fall. Why we have inventory fall? Because a lot of demand has created in the market. So that's why the suppliers are reducing the amount of the products in their storage. So that's why this inventory fall. This inventory fall is a sign for producer. What is the sign for producer? That, hey, the products in the market is in demand. So that's why you can produce more. And that is the production more, the produce more is actually equal to increase in Y. And that's why you can see that the increase in Y is happening from this level to this level. So you can see that the mechanism in these two is different, but the result is the same, that all of them, they are showing the increase in aggregate expenditure, their increase in demand, and finally the economic growth. So my friends, we are done with the tutorial 5. And I hope that the session was useful for you. Only 8 of us here. Thank you so much for coming at this time. It is not very early, I know, since morning you have had class. Next week, okay, let me